Welcome to Limited Engagement. My name's Melissa Barclay, and joining me today is Dan O'Donnell. You may recognize him from the Making a Murder docuseries on Netflix, and I'm sure you've been getting a lot of phone calls lately.
Yes.
You've been a very popular guy. I think a lot of people are looking at this docuseries and saying they're listening to how the Averys talk to one another. They're listening to the conversations, the lack of vocabulary, and could they have been so neat to have cleaned all of this stuff up? And were they, intelligent enough to actually know what to do and when to do it and stuff like that? There's that question too. I mean, do you think that they were mentally capable of producing all
I've
of
heard
this?
that. I've heard that. It's remarkably. I've
and
heard
maybe
this,
I'm
like,
looking
a
at this very
widespread thing.
naive.
I think it's sort of remarkably condescending that we assume just because somebody has a low IQ, they don't have the self-preservation instinct to clean up after a massive crime. In fact, it's interesting. Well, people say, well, why didn't he use the car crusher on the car? Why didn't he, well, because he has a low IQ and because he, as Dassey said, thought they had hidden the car well enough by putting an old hood on it and by putting some branches on it and putting it behind this massive, pit. That's exactly how somebody who doesn't really reason things through would think. All right? Also, the blood in the car, he had an open wound. I suspect it was from when he was stabbing Halbach or when he was doing something, he cut his finger. I don't know that, but the defense actually conceded, yes, he had an open wound on his finger. As he's wiping the car down very quickly for fingerprints, because he's seen the TV shows like you and I have, the blood is spurting on the car. That's why there's only a little bit of blood, and it's kind of all over the place. It's stuff that he's, touching, and he's trying to wipe up fingerprints as best he can. Remember, he's doing this relatively quickly, okay? Because he doesn't know how quickly the cops are going to be here, all right? He doesn't know this. They don't know this. But to suggest that he couldn't use her clothes, as Dassey said, wipe up the blood. Now remember, there was bleach on Brendan Dassey's jeans, all right? And he told his mother that, coincidentally enough, he was helping Uncle Steve clean the garage the night that Teresa Halbach was killed in that garage. Now, what are the odds of that? All right, so clearly he knew enough to clean up the crime scene. And this idea, well, if they used bleach, it would have been found in the pavement. How do you know? I mean, honestly, anybody who's saying this on Reddit and all of these amateur sleuths, you don't know, because physical evidence is dependent upon an infinite number of variables to be collectible and to be used as evidence. All right? What is kind of a common theme in my rebuttal is absence of evidence does not equal evidence of absence. So just because the evidence wasn't able to be collected does not mean that it wasn't there. Remember, when they finally went through the garage with the fine-toothed comb because they knew the murder was there, 6 months had passed since the actual murder. It wasn't until March. Well, 4 or 5 months, plenty of time for fingerprints to disappear.
So let's talk about the RAV4. We mentioned that. You said it's a 40-acre property. What are the chances of that woman going right around the corner and finding that RAV4?
Pretty strong.
Right up.
Actually,
pretty
strong because where she entered the property, the brother happened to let her in. There's 5 different entrances to the salvage yard. She came in basically here. The car was sort of here and hidden. What she was doing, her and her daughter, I forget her name, Pam Sturm, were walking. They were going row by row, back and forth. All right? So her pattern, the way she was moving, is exactly how I would expect someone to just kind of be looking. She happens to see a different car over this pit and says, that's weird. There's cars over there. Okay.
And
hey.
she said something like, that kind of looks like a RAV4, or
well,
was it green or something?
Yeah, she said, no, she got up there because she saw another car, and then she walked a little ways and then saw the RAV4, right, and said, and then, of course, it's picked apart because she said, I think God led me there. And, no, it's, it was luck, sure. It was absolutely luck, but there would have been subsequent searches of that property. All right, law enforcement would have eventually found that car. The fact that she found it is irrelevant because eventually, okay, the last place Teresa was seen was this salvage lot. Hey, the brother is allowing us onto the property. Every car would have been searched eventually. So it's, oh, well, she happened to find it. Well, yeah, okay, she happened to find someone else would have happened to have found it 2 days later, So
let's move on to the Manitowoc Police Department. They've been getting a lot of scrutiny.
The Sheriff's Department?
The Sheriff's Department.
Well, the Police Department has too.
The Sheriff's
That's the funny
Department,
thing.
sorry, yeah.
The Police Department has been getting death threats
Absolutely,
too
yeah.
until they realize, hey,
wait,
it's the Sheriff's Department. Okay.
Yeah. So do you feel right off the bat they should have been involved in this case? Do you think that was a mistake because of the past?
Yes, but they were under no legal or professional obligation to recuse themselves. They still had jurisdiction over the crime scene. And believe it or not, there's nothing in Wisconsin law, or there wasn't at the time, the law might have changed, I'm not really sure, that would have precluded them from, assisting. It wasn't, in fact, until the defendant started saying, the police set me up, the police are setting me up, that they said, okay, they're going to take an advisory role and they're going to do this. When really, law enforcement investigations of that magnitude are combined efforts. Like, it's a coordinated effort. So you've got state investigators, you've got the local sheriff's department, you've got local police department, all kind of, doing this. In hindsight, would it have eliminated the entire defense? Yes, obviously. But back then, nobody was engaging the fantastical story that Avery was saying, that the cops set him up. And there's actually a very telling line in Making a Murder. Very telling line. Dean Strang, Avery's attorney, says, well, when you've got your defendant telling everybody who will listen in interviews that the police set him up, that's sort of the defense you have to go with. All right? Now, that suggests to me Strang was thinking, we're not going to go with this defense, but because his client was screaming from the hilltops, the cops set me up, we got to go with that. I mean, that's how far from anyone's mind. I mean, the State Department of Justice, the Division of Criminal Investigation, could have very easily said, okay, we're going to take over this investigation. Manitowoc, because of the lawsuit.
Right.
Just
stay out of it.
Stay out, stay out. It was just not on anybody's mind. It was not on anybody's radar that this could have gone on. And I think it was, at the time, very reasonably thinking, okay, we're being sued. Like, your government can be sued at any point. Right. Now, generally, they have something that, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but they have something called sovereign immunity, which protects them from lawsuits. But, because someone has a beef with the local government or even is suing them, it really doesn't rise to the level of necessarily presenting a conflict.
Do you feel like there was any piece of evidence that the police department could have put into the whole scheme of things to make it more convincing that Avery did do the murder?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, they could have.
Do you believe?
No,
do you
I
believe?
don't.
You don't.
I do not.
Because a lot of people do believe that. But
they say, oh yes, the new one is, well, he did it, but the cops planted evidence to help the case along. So you're telling me that even though they found the burned remains in her burn barrel, they planted a little bit of Avery's blood in the car? And let me tell you about that blood, because the most convincing evidence that the defense presents is that the blood vial, and this is a big part of Making a Murder, had a little tiny
hole in the top.
Jerome Buting, a little tiny hole. You know what that hole was from?
From when the phlebotomist put the blood inside?
Yes.
The vial.
It was from the nurse who was going to testify, but did not, because the prosecution did not think that the defense did a good enough job with the blood vial to warrant that. She was going to testify that she put the hole when she drew Avery's blood. Now, how dishonest is it to present this as the aha moment when clearly the blood was planted? The filmmakers knew, Jerome Buting knew exactly why that hole was really there. Yet they kept that in the film. Buting presented that little hint of, well, the EDTA testing, it could have come from the vial. He knew exactly why the hole was there. The filmmakers knew exactly why the hole was there. I'm sorry, that's flat out dishonest. Yet they make it seem the episode builds to a crescendo where
Right
they
at the end,
find
it
this
shows-
blood vial.
Granted, it showed the tape on the evidence box that was cut open.
Right.
Whoever.
No, yes.
It should
Okay.
have-
Maybe should that have been? You know what that is just as likely to have been. Hey, is this really? Did we really get the blood? Okay, the blood vial's there. Put it back. You know, I just to make it seem as though, and they build an entire conspiracy theory off of this. I mean, give me a break. So no, I don't believe that any evidence was planted.
Do you think? Let's go back to the burn pit. I feel like, do you think her whole body was burned in the burn pit, even though there were just tiny fragments left?
Yeah.
Would the fire have gotten that hot, even with the tires on and everything? It could have just incinerated
Yeah.
the whole
I
body.
don't.
I mean, I don't know. That's why I'm asking. Like, I just think.
Yeah, this is. I've read this one on Reddit too. It's sort of the reminiscent of 9/11 was an inside job because jet fuel doesn't burn hot enough to melt steel beams. Yes, her body could have been incinerated, and
the bones, and you
Yeah.
would just have little fragments left.
just little fragments.
The one thing that wasn't in the docuseries is the tooth, and I read about that, like, through
Yeah.
other commentary and whatnot. But
Right, there
that's
was a tooth.
A tooth,
that
which
was
that,
from
to me, is like,
her
whoa.
dental record. I mean, that was her tooth. And the other theory is that she was burned in a quarry nearby and then moved because there was a hip bone that was found in the quarry. Do you know that hip bone was never even proven to have been a human bone? I mean, not only was it not Teresa's, it might not have been human. The Yonda burn pit, the secondary burn location, which is we're led to believe was another. Never any bones that were proven to have been from Teresa or human.
For reporters like you and other reporters that covered the case, it must have been so frustrating watching the docuseries, knowing that all the evidence was not there.
Yeah.
I think people also that did watch it and that weren't around for the case when it did happen, and then started reading outside commentary, were frustrated as well, because they're like, wait, you get done with the series feeling like, whoa, what just happened? Then you go and you read other material that the jurors were privy to and whatnot, and you're like, whoa, what just happened here? So you feel kind of duped in a way because you're not getting the full story. And I think anybody out there kind of you want to make that judgment or whatever yourself. Let's move on to a couple of just quick questions right towards the end. Do you believe Brendan Dassey got a fair trial? Do you feel like he got what he deserved? And do you think he really understood the ramifications that were happening to him while they were happening?
He sure did.
You think he did?
What happened was the defense attorney, that his public defender, was trying to get him, Len Kaczynski, was trying to get him to take a deal. Because once he confessed everything, and the details of his confession on March 1st matched up perfectly with the evidence that was collected. Like, they had everything. Kaczynski realized there is no way we're going to be able to win at trial. Now, the prosecution is offering a deal that would have required Dassey to testify against his uncle, would have got him out of prison in 20 years, possibly 25
And that was where
years.
they were telling him to draw what you saw.
Yes, so they're saying we need a
If you
description.
Sure.
Right. So, like, his investigator, Kaczynski's investigator, was saying, okay, Brendan, you've told us. Now what's not in the documentary is Dassey clearly told them, yes, I'm going to plead. Yes, I'm going to plead guilty. Let's do the confession. But then all of a sudden, his mom, I think, gets in his head and says, no, you got to fight this. The cops are out to get you, Brendan. They're out to get Stephen, too. Then she's giving him horrible advice. Go to trial. Go to trial. The lawyer is saying there's no way we can win. A lawyer's job is not to get his client off. It's to get the best possible outcome for the client. Dassey had more than fine representation, especially at trial. Ineffective assistance of counsel is very difficult to demonstrate. If you're saying, no, my attorney at trial was fine, it was the attorney I had before that I fired, he was the problem. A court will say, but you fired him. It's like that took care of that. Your attorney at trial was fine.
And you very well may be right when he was talking to his mom. One of the things that sticks out to me is when they were talking on the phone and he didn't know what inconsistent meant, and she didn't know what inconsistent meant. And I think a lot of people that were watching were like, "Are you kidding?"
Sure.
Like, that was very frustrating. Like, whoa, how can you not? Yeah.
Here's what is interesting about that is if you're to believe that he lied about his confession to interrogators, and he got the idea from a book. a book called Kiss the Girls by James Patterson, which is 464 pages long, and uses the word inconsistent several times. We're to believe that he doesn't know what inconsistent means, yet he was able to read that book, retain the information, and apply that to his elaborate lie.
So clearly someone was telling him to say,
Yeah. I mean, I believe he was telling the truth.
And just a couple quick questions here. Do you feel like we're forgetting who the real victim is here,
Yes,
Teresa Halbach?
absolutely.
I feel like there is an injustice just because, there's so much focus and attention on the Avery case, but yet we don't hear a whole lot about Teresa Halbach and the family, and this has got to be opening up so many wounds for them.
Oh, yeah.
And I just feel so badly for them that they have to kind of relive it again,
Well, think about
a decade
this.
later.
Think about this. You've got some of these amateur detectives on Reddit and Twitter who are seriously accusing Mike Halbach, her brother, of murdering Teresa. Now think about that for a second. An innocent man, a clearly innocent man, is in some corners of the internet presumed to have killed his sister. Why? No motive is really given. No, but they just toss out this accusation, forgetting that he's a real person. How do you think that makes his sisters feel? How do you think that makes his parents feel? How do you think that makes all of the friends feel that this guy is suspected by thousands of people of murdering his sister? That's a real human being right there. That's a real human being who experienced a loss that I wouldn't even want to contemplate, losing a sibling very close to me. All right? I think it's incredibly unfair to that family to be reminded of this, that horrible loss over and over, and to pour salt in the wound, the man that they knew killed their Teresa for a decade, now is being deified, now is being the subject of a petition to be released. Think about that for a second. How would that make you feel? I feel so awful for that family. I can't even wrap my head around what the last month and a half has been like for them. I can't.
Last question. Do you think, with all of this coming out, Stephen Avery's got new lawyers? What do you think is going to happen next? Do you think he will get a new trial? Do you think he will eventually get out?
No.
No, you don't.
No.
Because I've talked to some people in Manitowoc County that think that could possibly happen.
Yeah, well, they're probably nervous about
They're
that
probably
because they'd
nervous.
have to live with Stephen Avery. This attorney has already come out, this Chicago attorney, and is starting to litigate the case on Twitter. You know what that tells me?
She's out for
She's
publicity,
She's out for publicity, one, and two, she's trying to rekindle this public outcry because she knows the evidence is not very good. In fact, Dean Strang, his trial attorney, just said about a week ago, a big part of me worries that Avery is actually guilty.
Well, we'll leave it at that. Dan O'Donnell, thank you so much for letting us come in here today and talk to you.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been Limited Engagement. I'm Melissa Barclay. Until next time.